Hello. Thanks a great deal, as usual, for making time. And today I'm going to discuss an issue. A second, please. Today I'm going to discuss an issue. It has to do with the events in Sudan and also in Algeria. Are these events a harbinger of a sequel to the Arab Spring we saw? Some have named what happened, or some named what happened at the turn of the second decade of this century, the 21st century. Events from Tunisia, Libya, and other countries from the year 2010. Some have named it or chose to name it the Arab Spring. But in earnest, this was more of an African spring, because when you look at the countries that were affected and the countries that are being affected currently, they are more Maghreb countries than they are further afield countries. You know, the Middle East has got two different definitions. You can give it a micro definition looking at Gulf countries, countries in the Persian Gulf as well. And then you can look at the broader picture. We call it the MENA region, MENA, the Middle East and North African region. So whether MENA or the larger Middle East, the countries that were affected by the events of the Arab Spring Part 1 were in earnest African countries. Ben Ali was ousted in Tunisia. Tunisia is an African country. Colonel Gaddafi, unfortunately, initially some of us supported an intervention in Libya, but we were wrong. Libya is worse off today than it was under Colonel Gaddafi. So there was a crisis in Libya that saw the ouster of Colonel Gaddafi. That for me was not too much of an Arab Spring. It was an African Spring because Libya is an African country. Then the events in Egypt, that saw the ouster of Hosni Mubarak. So another event within the African continent, but the world chose to name what had happened the Arab Spring. Then in Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré also capitulated to mass protests and ran away. That one in earnest also happened in our next door neighboring country, Burkina Faso. So there are two African countries that are bubbling currently. They are boiling, so to speak. Abdelaziz Bouteflika has been the long-term leader of Algeria. He is so sick and frail, but he's going for another term. So there are protests in the country because people think he's done all he could and he should pave way for a fresh pair of sleeves. Then in Sudan, Omar al-Bashir. As for Omar al-Bashir, he's had enemies from within and without. The president of Sudan, the Republic of Sudan. Initially, we heard of the events of the Janjaweed, the Darfur crisis, the international outcry against Khartoum, then the secession of South Sudan. The black South Sudanese people wanted to break away from Khartoum. The United Nations, the US, and other countries around the world, the larger international community threw its weight behind South Sudan. And South Sudan has been a country at war. And I don't want to use harsh words because South Sudan isn't looking any good because they are killing each other. They wanted to break away because of issues of perceived or real discrimination, as the international community agreed to such, perceptions that the black people were being persecuted. So the world threw its weight behind the South Sudanese people to break away from Khartoum. And now they are fighting against each other. So Omar al-Bashir, and he has got an arrest warrant on him by the International Criminal Court at the same time. He travels with caution because he is considered a pariah by some countries. So from within and without, Omar al-Bashir has faced serious, opposition, stiff resistance at home, and, hostility from around the world. So will he be able to survive the recent spate of protests? The country's economy and isn't doing too well because three quarters, we are told, of the oil that served as the backbone of the country's, economy went away with the secession of South Sudan. There are concerns about how efficient the governance system has been under Omar al-Bashir. But I sympathize with him because he's been a beleaguered leader for so long, facing stiff resistance on the domestic front and hostility from many countries around the world. So if Omar al-Bashir is forced out of power, this could spark off a new wave of protests in the Maghreb and the larger African continent. So let's wait and see how things pan out. Algeria is facing issues. Sudan is also facing issues. Are we beginning to see early vestiges of a sequel to the prequel we see in the Arab Spring? Only time will tell. But then, I have not seen sincerity on the part of world powers. World powers that on the surface pretend that all they want is good governance, all they want is democracy in some of these countries. Egypt saw the ouster of Hosni Mubarak, who had ruled for so long. Then there was a new president who was duly elected. He was elected. Mohamed Morsi was elected. Then Sisi, through collaboration from certain quarters, overthrew him. And now Sisi wants to extend his stay as the leader of the country. So is it really true that some of these world powers want democracy for Africa and the Middle East? Or they put their money where their mouth is? Is it the oil they are interested in? Is it the destabilization of these countries they are interested in? Or they are rather interested in democratization? Where democracy was tried and tested in Egypt, there was a military, a coup d'etat, literally a coup d'etat. And the world did absolutely nothing about it. Morsi, a duly elected leader, is behind the bars currently. So let's read between the lines and understand the nuances of the geopolitics of the region. And I see the events in the Maghreb as more an African spring rather than an Arab spring. Thank you so much for your time.